Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of EV Buyer's Guide. Today, Travis and I are going to be talking about Fisker and the Fisker Ocean, how we got here, why we got here, where we are exactly. Why don't you start us off with some history of Fisker there, Travis?
Yeah, for sure. So Fisker really starts with Henrik Fisker. He is the one who started it all. He is the visionary behind the company, but it's not his first crack at it. And it's certainly not his first time in the automotive industry. So he really goes all the way back to the late 80s, starting with BMW. And he's a vehicle designer. And I think when
Mm-hmm.
you look at something like the Ocean, you can very clearly see that design is something he's very good at. He spent about a decade with BMW. Then he moved on to Ford, but at the time, Ford is the one who owned Aston Martin. So really, he's spending most of his time there with Aston Martin. We're looking at vehicles like the DB9, the V8 Vantage, some incredible machines he was a part of. From there, few may know, but he actually spent a very, very short time with Tesla. So he was
Mm-hmm.
one of the original developers for the Model S, one of the original designers. But this is where we start to see some of the controversy that's followed him, because shortly after he left Tesla as a designer, or I guess a consultant perhaps, he started up Fisker Automotive,
Yeah.
and the vehicle that popped out of this was the Fisker Karma. And he was almost immediately sued by Tesla because the Fisker Karma seemed to be too closely related to the Model S. And he did win that lawsuit, so Tesla was not successful. The
I
Fisker
mean,
Karma was the
plug-in hybrid
vehicle.
versus EV, right? So it's, yeah.
Well, and it's the overall design. If you look at that silhouette, there are plenty of
Oh,
similarities,
yeah.
but they are
Yeah.
certainly different vehicles, um, especially when it comes to the front end. But the Fisker Karma was the plug-in hybrid, as you mentioned, except that Fisker itself didn't do too well overall. That was very
Yeah.
much a mashup of parts. That was a beautiful design, but it was not a fully baked vehicle concept. They did sell a handful of them. You can still find them and buy them today. They are still serviceable and drivable.
Who
But
has the uh,
uh,
who has the Chrome Bieber Karma?
that's a great question. I'm sure it's not too hard to look up, but
Yes, any viewers, if
that
you
was
know where Bieber's Chrome Karma is, let us know down there.
well, and that was one of the big things with the Karma, was that it was very much a celebrity,
Mm-hmm.
hot button item. This is when folks are buying Priuses and saying, "Hey, I have a Prius." This is very much part of the eco movement, and then they could buy something that was not a Prius that was still part of the eco movement, and that was much preferred. So that's where you get
Yep.
vehicles like the Chrome Karma. But Fisker announced a few more vehicles after that, including the Surf and one other I can't remember off the top of my head. So we saw the next step, but they never quite got there.
Yeah.
Things went belly up, and the Fisker Automotive was purchased, sold, all the assets sold out. Karma Automotive kind of grew out of there, and the Fisker Karma still sort of exists in the Karma Rivero. If you're interested, you can buy those brand new today. But after that, Fisker went and spent some time on his own. He did some consulting. He did some fledgling companies with some serious names like Bob Lutz, talking about some coach building
Mm-hmm.
companies, some one offs, very much in the vehicle design sort of thing. And then in 2016, Fisker popped up again with Fisker Automotive, and they said, "Hey, we're going to build an Ocean."
Yep, and that is where we are now. And it's there's some similarities between Fisker 1.0 and Fisker 2.0, shall I say? The
Mm-hmm.
product's not being quite ready. I can kind of accept some of that because it is a startup company. So the question of how complete does the product need to be before we get it on the road and start getting
Mm-hmm.
cash in, that's tricky. This time around, they went, I mean, gangbusters, really, because it wasn't just one product and then, a follow up and maybe like a vague hint of the third. This seems
Mm-hmm.
like they were really trying to develop like a full product line on a shoestring budget. And
Yeah.
that's where we end up with the Ocean that we reviewed. So if you haven't checked out that review, that's over on the Auto Buyer's Guide channel where reviews normally live. And
Mm-hmm.
let me know your feedback on this, Travis. But I really intended initially for that to be a review without commentary on where Fisker was, etc. But Fisker's
Mm-hmm.
position just made that absolutely impossible. We booked the Turo rental for it, I don't know, 8 weeks ago, something like that, not
Yeah.
knowing that the end was
But
nigh.
Fisker was still a company.
Right.
It was still
Um,
on its way and moving forward.
and we don't have any, as of the day we're recording this video, we don't have any idea where Fisker will be. We know they've been delisted from the New York Stock Exchange. They have stopped building Oceans, but they're still selling them. So ostensibly you could still
Mm-hmm.
buy one. Their cars
At a
still
steep
function.
discount.
steep discount. You could still get them
Hmm.
serviced. Service is a little bit of a problem, which we'll discuss in this video here. But
Hmm.
there's it's still kind of going along, so we don't know whether or not it will get saved at some point in the future. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know. What did you think? What was your takeaway impression on my time with the Ocean?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I got a sneak peek. We had some conversations about it, and really, I think what we do with our channel is trying to inform people, and we try to give them the information that's necessary. And the extra commentary added is really because it has to be. If it would, I think it would be irresponsible if you came out and said this is just like every other vehicle on the road,
Hmm.
because if people are right now looking to buy a car or excuse me, an Ocean, and they, especially because they saw there's a steep discount and they said, "Ooh, this is a lot of
Yeah,
vehicle for a great price," and they clicked on our video. We want to make sure they understand what it is they're getting, and they're getting somewhat of a half-baked product that may have a very short shelf life, and that's really important, especially for an electric vehicle, especially something so software-based and that has so many
yeah,
software problems. So, I overall I think it's fair to say that this is the vehicle and this is the ownership experience that you should expect
right.
because people look to our content for information and they want to rely on it. So I think it was necessary.
And I will say, this starts on the Q&A session, I guess, because the video comments here. We had a
Hmm.
lot of people, a lot of Fisker owners that were upset about certain characterizations of the vehicle. And I have to be frank, I don't think that the half-baked part is necessarily the software. There are elements of the software that they do need work and that are still very buggy. And this was
Hmm.
2.0. This is the current release version of the Fisker software. The Bluetooth connection's not reliable. Every time we drove it, we had to reset the infotainment system to get the Bluetooth to reconnect to the vehicle so it would play.
Hmm.
I mean, it was easy to do. I will give them that. Like, they made it easy to reset. They did not make it easy to reset the entire vehicle, however. So,
Hmm.
unfortunately, because ours had a service call initially, and this I want to address another comment on the Turo rental. Someone commented that it
Yeah.
was irresponsible for the Turo owner to rent it to us with this problem. The Turo owner did not know. Let me be perfectly frank. We had a lot of frank conversations with him. He let us know in advance, hey, the 12-volt battery died. I'm working to get a service call. I don't think this will work. But it was my call, and I'm like, no, I want to, make a video on this thing. I want to drive it. I want to see what this thing is like. And so I don't care. I'll take it anyway.
Hmm.
Um, Service tech comes out, replaces the 12-volt battery. We all assumed that would be all that was required. It,
Which would be
you know,
what you
he
expect.
which is what you'd expect. And he didn't drive it
Yeah.
because this is a vehicle that he rents out. So he had the 12-volt battery
Right.
replaced. Service calls over. He's like, great, it actually happened. I can unlock and lock the car. Uh, Good to go. He didn't sit there and test every feature on the car. Why would you? So that's not
Right.
rational. But the concern I have, and the reason I brought that part up in the video, is that if you are thinking about it, or you are worried what's going to happen to your Fisker, everybody's going to have a 12-volt battery replaced at some point. And if you can't make these realignments and whatever it is that has to happen in software, if you can't do that yourself, then you're going to
Hmm.
have a problem at some point in your ownership cycle.
And as you mentioned, that 12-volt battery is kind of a known issue that Fisker doesn't have a solution for. So it's not going to be at some point down the road. It's more than likely going to
Yeah.
be pretty close down the road.
Yeah, and I will say that, aside from that, obviously that part not great. The
Hmm.
software, I like the general design of it. I do like some of the cool touches that they had here and there. My half-baked commentary actually has more to do with everything else on the vehicle. It's not the way the software is done. I'm perhaps more forgiving on the software than I know some reviewers have been on the Ocean, or
Hmm.
even some owners, because that is an area where I think that honestly they could change. And if you're interested in a
Hmm.
software-defined vehicle and you're gung-ho about that, then wait for the update and you should be fine. But there are
Hmm.
things that you cannot change in software. You can't change the way the suspension is tuned, which is peculiar, I will say, in the
Hmm.
Ocean. It handles relatively well, but the body motions are not well controlled. You definitely end up hitting the bump stops in the rear if you have, 2, 3 people in the vehicle and you're going over some rough terrain, or even larger bumps on the road, say like
Hmm.
speed bumps, etc. It's a fairly heavy vehicle, fairly soft springs, not a lot of suspension travel. So I think that could have been better done. Not a huge fan of the steering. Um, The regenerative braking, that could be fixed in software. Not great.
Is it just not enough of it, or is it just the way it engages?
It's the way that it engages. So there are three levels of throttle liftoff regen.
Hmm.
It was difficult to get any information out of Fisker. I emailed and they were not responding to press at the moment because obviously problems, right? So by
And
all
I tried as
indications,
well earlier,
yeah.
and same
Um,
thing, no response.
so by all indications, it has blended braking, like a Prius and like most EVs outside of Rivian and Tesla. So foot on the brake
Hmm.
pedal, you get more regen. It's not just the throttle liftoff part. But the car does keep wanting to go back to the high level regen. Power cycles
Mm.
and some software bugs, just you end up there now and then back in the high regen
Yeah.
when you don't expect it. And that experience is odd because you're on the accelerator pedal, you lift off, and it has kind of a gradual build to the regen, and then all of a sudden it sort of falls
Mm.
off a cliff and you get very aggressive regen.
Got
um,
it.
if you put your foot on the brake pedal in any of the modes and you're braking moderately and then you transition to a more aggressive braking cycle, there's a weird
Hmm.
pause before things engage, sort of like a first generation Prius. I think those could be
Oh, okay.
fixed in software. And then there's some of the things that you and I had discussed previously when we saw a few on the road.
Hmm.
And this has to do more with the design philosophy and engineering philosophy at Fisker.
Which is a
Honestly,
lot.
there's a lot. I mean, designing a new
Yeah.
vehicle is very expensive and it gets very
Hmm.
complicated. And I think that some engineers tend to go down design and feature rabbit holes sometimes. And so I was shocked by the number of options available on the Ocean. If we
Hmm.
go over to the Fisker website right now and we configure one, let's just do this for giggles here. So just looking at the Fisker Ocean configuration page, we have 3 different trims. If we click on the color tab, we have, oh my, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different colors. We have
Hmm.
a bunch of different wheels, looks like 6 different wheels, at least 3 interior colors, a few packages depending on what you're looking at. And then, of course, some accessories, which don't matter because those are installed somewhere else. But, there's a
Right.
reason that when you go to the Tesla dealer, you got 4 colors, and those 4 colors are all pretty expensive. Fisker's color scheme here, there is a $4,500 color option, but most of them are only $975. So they're pretty reasonably priced. I mean, that's a good
Yeah.
thing for the
Right.
customer, bad thing for business model. And I think that sort of streamlining, should have been done at some point in the
Ye-
product life cycle.
Well, and it's not just the options available; it's the different pieces that exist on the Ocean that make it so different from every vehicle out there.
Hmm.
It's a very competitive segment that the Ocean sits in, right? That mid-size crossover, basically. And they said, how do we make it different? Well, it's got the solar roof, it's got the California mode. Those are all really cool, but those are extra costs that the other
Hmm.
manufacturers are probably not taking on for a reason. And if you're the fledgling manufacturer who is not absolutely drowning in cash, that seems like a very risky move. And if I were an investor in Fisker Automotive, that's not something I would have been on board with, especially when you look at what happened with the Fisker Karma and the
Yeah.
other vehicles that Fisker was supposed to make at that time. You look at this and you
Hmm.
go, that's a lot. Like, why is there a
Yeah.
rotating screen that is only designed to be used while you're parked? That
Hmm.
seems like a feature that could very much either have been added in later
Yeah.
or just thrown out altogether.
And then there's that separate screen below the rotating screen for the climate control buttons and all of that. That
Hmm.
adds cost. And every piece of glass except for the windshield and the rearmost sunroof open. So the sunroof
Hmm.
opens, the rear windows go down, the windows in the D pillar go down, which is totally cool. I like the idea.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I
We're
would
not
say,
saying
if
don't do
yeah,
it.
if
It's
Fisker
just
had,
don't do it first.
yeah, and if Fisker had maybe another $1.5 billion, they could have made a go of this. Um,
Hmm.
but to the customers that are worried, can this be resurrected? Can it get cheaper and be functional? I would argue it's difficult for this to be any less expensive. I know the price point was something that they had missed. That was honestly to be expected. Every manufacturer seems to miss a price point. But remember, this is built by a contract manufacturer in Austria. So Magna is the one building the vehicle. It's not built in a Fisker factory. They don't have any factories. This car company doesn't. And that intrinsically is going to make it more expensive. Fisker has to make a profit.
Hmm.
The manufacturer Magna has to make a profit. The dealer network has to make a profit. And they're trying to do a blended model in the US where there's some direct and some dealer sales.
Hmm.
All that, just adds extra cost and complexity to the vehicle. I was really honestly concerned when when we all heard that Magna was the one making the vehicle. It has nothing to do with Magna. I mean, they make the G-Wagon, they make
Hmm.
the I-Pace, or not the current
Hmm.
G-Wagon, have made the G-Wagon in the past.
Right.
But you look at their portfolio, they have made relatively low volume, relatively high dollar products by car companies that either are building very expensive cars, or there's a low volume model that they find essential in the lineup, and they know
Hmm.
it's not going to make money, like the I-Pace. They knew they weren't going to build a lot. Um, the G-Wagon, it's a high dollar value car, so that made sense for them there. Uh, Intrinsically, the Ocean was never going to get down to a $35,000 car unless Magna really changed things up and decided they weren't going to make a lot of money on this thing.
Well, and I mean, to Magna, you look at another vehicle that sort of fits in this segment. You just mentioned the I-Pace. Jaguar makes vehicles. They make, well,
Hmm.
not tons, but they make a lot of vehicles. And they said, hey, this is too different for it to make sense for
Yeah.
our factory to be retooled to suddenly build this. Okay, the I-Pace is out there. You look at another manufacturer who is just starting out, and you look at something like Grenadier, or excuse
Yep.
me, the Ineos with the Grenadier, and they didn't hire someone to build it. They paid all the money for all the factory, for all the tooling to do
Hmm.
all of it themselves.
Yeah.
If Fisker said, hey, we want to build the Ocean and we're going to get started here, sort of a proof of concept, that would be great. But I had not heard of any major factory being built, designed, ready to go. It
Yeah.
didn't seem like there was a huge step forward plan. And you look at the other manufacturers who have used these services and what they've done elsewhere, and it just didn't seem like Fisker was heading that direction.
It's interesting, and I don't know if they really could have moved production somewhere else without Magna's approval, because apparently the Ocean itself is actually based on a Magna platform. Now, details here are
Mm-hmm.
tricky because of, obviously Fisker's not talking right now.
No one wants to talk about that part. Yeah.
Yeah, and Magna does own a minority share in Fisker, we should say. So there's a 6% ownership share in Fisker. So there's a little bit of investment in there.
Hmm.
Fisker did at some point say that this was on a heavily revised version of an EV platform that Magna is really trying to present to other boutique car manufacturers
Hmm.
out there to try and help
Which makes
lower
perfect
costs.
sense.
It makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense to me, yeah. But when we look at what they're building now, so actually, I have to correct myself. So apparently, G-Wagon is still built there. We also have Jaguar E-Pace and I-Pace, low volume
Mhm.
products. E-Pace is the least expensive there. BMW Z4, of course, the Supra, the Fisker Ocean, and W Motors Fenner Super Sport is also currently made by them, which is kind of a wacky hypercar looking
Mhm.
thing. But they've manufactured all sorts of random things, like the European market Chrysler 300, Grand Cherokee, the Mercedes-Benz SLS AMG, the Aston Martin
Mhm.
Rapide was made by them, the Mini Paceman. They made some BMW 5 Series here and there, Volkswagen Transporters, etc. Um, but none of them are extraordinarily high volume or mainstream low cost products, and that's kind of the
Right.
tricky thing there. Magna's, of course, a big part supplier, and they supply, well priced, high quality components for all sorts of car companies. But that is a tricky bit. And because of its factory location, because they weren't pairing with a North American manufacturer, you didn't get the tax credit. And I
Right.
was shocked. So that price differential is huge. You can end up with a Model Y Performance for about 52,000, something like that, after the tax credit.
Mhm.
The Ocean that we were driving, if we were to configure one of those today on their configurator, was about 72,000.
Right. And that's a big chunk, and you're falling into that range where it's not an ultra luxury item.
Hmm.
It's not
Yeah.
truly one of a kind, and there's nothing else like it. Sounds weird, but if you want more air, you can go get a plug-in Jeep Wrangler and have some sort of similar experience.
Yeah.
I do think one of the other big conversations was what's Fisker's bailout option, and there were talks about a big manufacturer being a part of that conversation. Sounds like Nissan may have been that lead partner, um, but
Hmm.
if what Fisker has put together is much more of the design and not all the construction, all the components, then what are they going to have to offer any other
Exactly.
manufacturer? And I think that's why things fell short, because It's a
Yeah.
beautiful design. I absolutely love to look at it. I love some of the ideas that they had, but really they're selling ideas, and you can get ideas for a lot cheaper than a struggling, drowning car company.
Yeah.
And I'd say, unfortunately, for Magna is actually going to be one of the big losers in this, because obviously there's a contract that's not going to be continuing if they
Mhm.
have money invested. If they want to show off their product, they may have done that. They may have actually successfully been able to talk to manufacturers and say, "Hey, here's what we did. Here's what we
Yeah,
were
we made
doing, and
one.
it was our pieces were working," and what that looks like. But honestly, I worry about the people who bought the Fisker Ocean, excited about it, excited about the fact that it's different.
Yeah.
But in 6 months or a year, they might just be hoping something doesn't go wrong, because I don't think there's going to be a big aftermarket and people wanting to specialize in servicing Oceans because there are so few of them on the road.
Yeah, I detected a lot of buyer's remorse, to be honest, in the comment section, especially, on Facebook where we posted some commentary first.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to tell it to people this way, but our job is not to make them feel good about their purchase, even though a lot of people watch car reviews for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Ocean has a personality, and it has a good personality. I, generally speaking, like it, but there are too many flaws for me to recommend it, especially at its price tag. And I think that's the big thing that I come down to a lot. And we've had this discussion, is like, anything
Mm-hmm.
can be fine for the price. And to be
Yep.
honest, the price tag of the fully loaded model would have to be under $45,000 or so for it to be good for the price, because
Mm-hmm.
the Model Y exists and it gets a
Yeah.
tax credit, and so does a Chevy Blazer. If you want something softer and different looking, I mean, you can get a Blazer, you can get a Cadillac Lyric with tax
Yeah.
credits because they're built here.
And even
And
right
obviously,
now, I think
yeah,
that the top model's almost $25,000 off, which is an
yeah,
incredible amount, but it still is a little bit more expensive than
yeah,
that. And
but
and
only
to your point,
only the 2023 models that are already waiting, so not
right?
for theoretically new orders, which you know may or may never get fulfilled.
Well, because nothing's getting built right now. But the
Right.
other part is, we could say, hey, here's some of the downsides here, and like you said, this is just information. This is not huge opinion. It rides weird. Okay, well, does that matter
Yeah.
to you or not? Do the
Right.
seats fit? There's not a lot of options
Hmm.
there. But you love the color, you love the shape. Wonderful. The
Yeah.
problem is nobody buys a new car expecting not to be able to get it serviced in a year or two or three,
Hmm.
or in a lot of cases right now, not even being able to trade it in anywhere because there's so
Right.
much uncertainty with that company. We're not rooting for them to fail. We like
Hmm.
interesting EVs. We like companies trying to do something different. There's a big difference between vaporware and a
Yeah.
struggling company. Fisker is a struggling company, but a lot of folks
Yeah.
might be going down with the ship they didn't know they were really, hitching their lifeboat to.
Yeah, I mean, for the price of the one that we have, I'm just looking it up here. You could get a sport trim 2024 Lyric. Actually, it'd even be less than that, because, of course, it would get the federal tax credit on purchases.
Yeah,
Which
which
and
means
I
you
will
could trim
say,
up.
in their defense, over at Fisker, when this vehicle was designed, they didn't realize that the tax credit would end up the way that it did, and that really has put
Yeah,
a hard line on foreign manufactured EVs, whether you're a startup or not. That
right. They're
North
not the only
American
ones.
manufacturing requirement, it's a big deal, and it's
Yeah.
cost every car company out there, except for the ones that were already here, a lot of money. Hyundai, Volvo, etc. They're all spending large amounts of money moving production to North
As quickly as
America,
they can.
but they
Yeah.
had the resources, and that's the bigger deal there. Um, I will say that there's the promise is also some of what was interesting on the Ocean. And to be fair here, there was the promise of the digital radar, which is kind of cool, so it can better identify objects and
Hmm.
give you that next level of autonomy. I was more
Hmm.
interested in that and what they could have done with those hardware systems than what we see at Tesla, where they're trying to go vision only. Because
Right.
hardware wise, it has the ability to do more. It has, a more advanced driver monitoring system, more advanced radar sensors, which we don't find in modern Teslas, but the
Hmm.
software was just never completed there. But those
It's a short game
sensors,
versus a long game thing.
yeah, those sensors are already on the car, which, cost cash there, of course. And you could get a Lyric with
Right.
Super Cruise right from the factory, or a
Well,
Mach-E.
and for Tesla as an example, all Teslas come built in to do their full self-driving
Hmm.
features. That costs
Yep.
them money, but they are only cameras. So they are not
Yep.
extra radars and lidars and sensors. They are just cameras that a lot of vehicles have anyway, just for turn signal,
Yep.
or your side view mirror or your rear view mirror. Those are all camera options these days.
Hmm.
So even though Tesla puts it in, it's not a whole lot more expensive than it
Right.
would be to put in a bunch of these other features. And Tesla's kind of playing a short game, it seems like, versus someone who's putting lidar in the vehicle starting now. But you can't play the long game if you can't survive the short game. That's
Yep.
just that's just
It's
not
a
how that works
problem.
out usually. And unfortunately, Fisker had other options coming out for us. There was the pear.
Hmm.
We've made the joke about pear shaped. It's because it writes itself. There's nothing we can do about that. And the pear was going to be a more affordable option, another interesting, more affordable option. We can't use
Yeah.
enough of those in the world right now. And then, personally, sort of a pet project, I was really excited about the Alaska. A small
Hmm.
electric truck can do so many things in so many ways. It's sort of what we're seeing on the Ford Maverick
Hmm.
hybrid. Just say what is a more efficient truck capable of, if not the
Yeah.
max towing? Where does it fit in this category? And unfortunately, it seems like those probably won't make it. I guess out of that comes a Mitsubishi Nissan announcement that says, "Hey, we're going to work on a truck together,"
Hmm.
and that came shortly after it was announced that Fisker was not going to be working with the manufacturer, which may or may not
Yeah.
have been Nissan. So,
Yeah. And I really was interested in the pair, stupid names aside, because that was going to be manufactured in the United States, in Lordstown, Ohio. So, ostensibly it
mhm,
could have qualified for at least some portion of the federal tax treatment, which would have been very advantageous. That is interesting because it was a coordination between Fisker and Foxconn, best known for making iPhones and iPads, etc.
mhm,
Um, and so this is part of that sort of, Fisker trying this new model where they design the vehicle, but they don't make the vehicle. They're sort of a contract designer
mhm,
manufacturer here. Um, and I'm intrigued by that. The cost structure is just what I can't quite figure out. I'd also
yeah.
sort of hoped that maybe Foxconn would try and buy the pair design, try and make a go of it, but without a dealer network, that's a little bit tricky.
Well, we've got a couple examples of that as well. Just real quick, is that
Hmm.
they're looking at using Lordstown. Well, Lordstown, they're probably looking at the factory that was Lordstown Motors. But if you're
Yep.
looking at an automotive group and an outside automotive group, Honda and Sony are doing something. But those are two very well established brands, and one of them has made automobiles for a very long time. So
Hmm.
sort of an advantage there if you're going to lean into it.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you have the right partners, and so it just I'm not sure there's a third opportunity, a third swing here for Fisker. Not just right now. I mean, I love to see them turn something around and see some interesting vehicles stay on the road, but this might be the last time Henrik Fisker starts a car company
I mean, I'll be honest. If I had a car company, I would hire Henrik to design the look of the
as a
car. I
designer.
wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't.
Absolutely,
I clearly would not hire him to run a car company. I think.
yeah.
Um, you know, maybe that's the core problem here: lack of money and the wrong people at the helm, because there's so much promise but also such odd decisions going on in the car. Why no lumbar support? Why only a six-way adjustable driver's seat? You can't adjust the seat bottom cushion for tilt. um
Hmm.
it's missing a lot of features that you would expect to find in a vehicle of that price. And that's where, definitely there were a lot of commenters saying, it's the best car in the world. I love it. It's my favorite car ever. And it's like, that's lovely. If it is your favorite car, that is
That's
fantastic.
awesome.
But
Absolutely.
tricky part, claiming things are best in the world when they just are objectively not, and they're objectively missing features that other vehicles would have. There's a degree of hubris in any automotive designer's repertoire, I would say.
Hmm.
And for this one, it definitely seems to be ignoring the fact that people come in different sizes. I found the driver's seat to be relatively comfortable. I did drive it for 6 hours yesterday straight, and I wish the
Hmm.
driver's seat was more comfortable. I wish it had adjustable lumbar support. But if you're shorter than
Yeah.
me or taller than me, it's not going to hit you in the same place because we're not the same size. There are people come in different sizes. If car designers hadn't realized this, so that
Yeah.
is definitely a bummer. But let us know what you all think about that down there in the comment section. I told myself I would keep this episode to about 30 minutes, and we have that right on the clock so far before editing. So let us know what you think
Yeah.
about that. Find us over Facebook. If you haven't watched the full review video, be sure to check that out on the Auto Buyer's Guide channel. It is on the long side because we wanted to just stick
Covers
as
a
much
lot.
in there as we could. Yep. So see
Yeah.
everybody
Thanks for
later.
joining us.